These are not activists calling for lifting of sanctions on millions of Syrians. They are the US-backed Syrian opposition in Washington after a meeting with Congress members. What for? They are asking Congress to impose more draconian sanctions to further choke the Syrian people. If you talk to any of these opposition figures, they say the sanctions do not affect ordinary people. But is that really the case? Let us put a scale and measure things logically. The sanctions against Syria are illegal because they are unilateral measures outside the framework of the UN, and they target all sectors of the Syrian state because they paralyze the two most important sectors in the country, the central bank and the energy sector. Now, when you paralyze these two sectors, you paralyze all sectors of the Syrian state whose activities depend on money and energy. Therefore, maintaining or intensifying the sanctions on the regime's sectors has a direct impact on the people's livelihood in Syria, their purchasing power, their desire for education, work, medical care, etc. Because of the sanctions, for example, Syrian hospitals cannot import spare parts to repair medical equipment. The irrigation sector cannot purchase the equipment needed to repair water pumps. This applies to all sectors because the Caesar Act prohibits dealing with Syria and receiving transactions from it. Therefore, even third country companies are hesitant to sell equipment to Syria due to overcompliance with sanctions because they have great economic interests with the United States, and their business interests come first. And this leads to the slow killing of the Syrian people. Based on that, my position on the sanctions and the urgent need to lift them is moral and in the interest of millions of people in Syria. Now, does the regime benefit from lifting sanctions? Of course. But do the Syrians benefit from lifting the sanctions? Definitely. Therefore, when we weigh the pros and cons, the people are the biggest beneficiaries. Look, I do not consider myself a moral judge, but when public figures involved in politics are working day and night in Washington to practice their sadism on the Syrian people, I have all the right as a Syrian to harshly criticize them and even call them traitors. Choking and slowly killing the Syrian people is immoral and sadistic and amounts to an act of treason. And coincidentally, all so-called exiled opposition figures based in the US do the same thing. They work to impose sanctions on their own people in Syria, in Cuba, in Venezuela, in Iran, and in Russia. But is that really a coincidence?